Welcome to episode 4 of the Shiny Things Improv podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Balakchin, and this is a place where I get to pick the brains of all my favourite improvisers. Today's guest is Laura Riseborough, actor, comedian and improviser. Having trained at RADA and East 15, Laura built a career on stage with high-profile productions, including work with the Royal Shakespeare Company, before diving into the world of improv in 2019. Since then, she's become a fixture of the scene, performing in hit shows like Austintatious, Sliding Lives, Episodes, 666 Hell Lane, and of course the show we're both in together, Big Little Place. She also teaches at the Free Association in London, including a course she devised called Acting Skills for Improvisers. It was absolutely fascinating chatting to Laura, particularly hearing her perspectives on improv coming from a professional acting background. I really think you're going to enjoy this. Here's a taste of what we got coming up.
I think people say you've really got to commit more to the scene, but what does that mean? Sometimes, sadly, I'll come off and someone will go, whoa, that was the craziest thing, how did you think of that? And I'm like, that was me. That one was me. Everything else was made up, and that one that you think is terrifying, that was me. Instead of saying I'm nervous, if you look in the mirror and say to yourself, I'm excited, you can repurpose it and you will perform better. I maybe have been surprised coming into comedy that like the cool kid thing to do sometimes is seen to be to just jump up there and have no preparation. It's one of those things where I'm like, absolutely believe we should be totally kind to ourselves and understand we did the best in the given circumstances and all of these different elements were going on. And then it comes to yourself and you're like, but I am a grub.
Laura Riseborough, welcome to the show.
Hello, Aaron.
Excited to have you here.
I'm very excited to be here. This is nice, isn't it?
Just a little chat about improv.
Just a little chat. No stakes, big stakes, big stakes.
You are obviously an established actor. Could you talk a little bit about your acting career before you came to improv?
I suppose I've been acting all my life, but not always for money. But I did grow up doing a lot of youth theatre, a lot of plays and stuff like that, and then went to drama school, went to 2 different drama schools. I went to RADA and did a foundation year there. And then after that, I did a BA 3-year in acting at East 15. And then graduated in 2011. So after I graduated, I worked with a number of different companies, a number of different like theatres in London, outside of London. My first production was a short run of something at the Arcola Theatre, which was very blood heavy. It was very stage blood heavy. There was a lot of offal. It was a mad production of Phaedra's Love, but then quickly moved on to Northern Stage, and I've done a couple of productions for them up in Newcastle, where I'm originally from. So it was nice to go home after training and do some theatre up there. And I'd say mostly my career has been a mixture of live Shakespeare. So I've worked with the RSC, and I've worked with a Guildford Shakespeare Company, Women at RADA, things like that. I've done a lot of live Shakespeare and a lot of audio sci-fi, a lot of audio horror and sci-fi, audio Doctor Who and things like that, audio dramas, and then strange bits of live and recorded comedy as well. But mostly, for a long time, I was just on a classical acting track, really, and that was the focus. I was doing other bits, stand-up, things like that on the side, but I think at that time I just wanted to be part of a theatre company. What I mean by that is basically a gang of friends. I wanted to be paid to be in a gang of friends that would like be doing the same show every night, because I'd come from this more theatrical background. I didn't know anyone particularly in comedy, but yeah, that's what I was interested in. So when I had done these other bits of comedy in the past, I thought, oh, you've got to, if you want to be in comedy, you've got to drive up and down the country and do gigs in working men's clubs late at night by yourself. And I wanted to be part of a company at that point.
And how did you end up coming to improv?
I was asked in, I suppose, the very end of 2018 by a friend who I'd worked with at the RSC. They knew Sophia Broido, who runs Uncle Glenn's Menagerie, a fantastic show. If you haven't seen it, do go and see it. I was asked as an actor to do that show because the premise of the show is they team up an actor with an improviser, and an actor has the script and reads one half of the lines, and the improviser gets to fill in the blanks and improvise the other set of lines, the other character. And yeah, so I did that twice as an actor. And that was my first encounter with the Free Association, who then I went on to train with. And that's where I met you. Very important, as we did a lot of our early training together in 1 month in intensives back to back, because we were very committed. And then joined a team, then auditioned for Harold teams, got into a Harold team. So that was in 2019. I started training and in February 2019. And then by July, I think I was in the Harold team. And then the next year we had the pandemic. So I suppose I'd been improvising for about a year before the pandemic hit. And then we tried to keep that going at home and online as much as we could, or small gigs, distance gigs once we were allowed to do that. And then at the beginning of 2022, I started teaching for the Free Association as well. Before the FA, before long form, the only contact with comedy improv I'd had was at RADA. I'd done classes with Philippa Waller, who introduced us to some the kind of basic premises of improv, but nothing to do with game, nothing to do with building a kind of what the Free Association would teach you or UCB would teach you. It was just the vague idea of comedic improv. But then when I was at East 15, I was doing a lot of improvisation, but it was method acting improvisation. So improvisation had been a big feature in my life before I found the Free Association, but it'd been very dramatic. So I was used to using it in conjunction with method acting and system acting and practitioners like Stanislavski, and how I'd prepare a script or how I'd get like a backstory for a character, and working in that way for it. Done a lot of improvised performance and a lot of improv in the rehearsal process, but just not comedic. It was often incredibly dark or very harrowing. And East 15 was quite known for that as a drama school. So they have a project in the first year that is quite notorious called Living History, where you spend 3 years, no, that would be too much. That was the whole degree. You spend 3 weeks researching a conflict from history, and then you spend 3 weeks improvising that conflict. And there are directors walking around managing things, but it's a huge project. Often bits are outdoors as well. And so, for example, my year, it was the Greek Civil War. So you spend these long periods improvising, maybe 8 hours a day, in these quite heavy, reenacting these quite heavy historical conflicts. But there are other projects as well you might spend when you were looking at developing a certain character or working on a certain text for a certain play. You might do like a afternoon long or a day long improvisation on a certain thing, or recreating something, an event that's mentioned in a text. You might then, that isn't seen in the play, you might use the improvisation as a rehearsal tool to recreate that event and then live through it, so that when you're then acting out on stage and you reference it, it's a thing that's happened for you. You're more connected to it because you have lived that experience that then you're talking about.
That sounds incredibly intense.
It is really intense. And it all comes from early 20th century Stanislavski and his work with Chekhov, and that massively changed the theatrical landscape in the West and led to method acting and the idea that an actor would actually try and feel what the character was feeling, not just portray it or display it for the audience, but that they would actually try and connect with it. And it was one of their rehearsal tools. And then there was a big kind of theatrical revolution in England around the 50s, 60s. Jonah Littlewood, the Theatre Workshop, led to East 15 as a school as well. So that school that I trained at is quite tied to that historical tradition, that way of approaching work, particularly in the first year and the second year and the third year. It's a little bit more industry focused now. But yeah, so my life and my performance before I tried to make it funny. Yeah.
And so obviously then you came to the FA and you have now obviously established yourself as an improviser. What do you think it is about improv that kept you there in a way that stand-up and clowning didn't?
I think improv for me personally was an interesting combination of a couple of different elements that were already swirling around maybe in my performance practice. This mixture of being able to make things up and really commit in an imaginary circumstances pretty much straight off the bat, and then these other comedic element, and then just trying to make it funny, all this practice of this very heavy stuff, and then going, okay, but it's allowed to be funny now. So that felt, when I started doing it, of course you're going through a curriculum and you're trying to train and achieve certain skills through the exercises and all that stuff, and then getting game theory and trying to play that really efficiently and proficiently, so then you can throw it out the window again, all of that stuff. But it felt like a coming together of skills I'd been practicing in different areas maybe. And I think with a lot of people actually I meet who are improvisers, often people have come to it at a certain point in their life where they were like at a crossroads, or they felt like one phase had ended and another one was beginning. So I think I was also in that place. I was, okay, my career's ticking along, but what next? And you meet all of these friends on jobs and you get very close very quickly, and then they go off to the next job, and you stay with some of them and you lose contact with others. And the idea of having a bit of a kind of artistic home, or a bit of a sense of community in London. Like, I didn't grow up in London, so I don't have like old friends here in the same way. I suppose I had a feeling of community when I was at drama school, because we were all there every day and supporting each other. But then people go off and they get jobs now, and yeah, so it felt it was not only a performance outlet, it was a fun thing to do, but also there were all these amazing people that you meet as well, which is lovely. Yeah, I think I don't quite know what my life would look like, if I'm honest. I don't quite know what my life would look like now if I hadn't started the first session in 2019. Maybe not that different, but maybe very different.
Yeah. I can totally relate to that. I was definitely going through a transition period, and I think that sense of community, I did grow up in London, and I still didn't have that sense of community here. You have your friends that you go and you visit for an evening here, you go somewhere else to visit them there. But I think, improv really does offer that quite unique thing of a
particularly
proper community.
If, like, you have one home-based theatre. Like, the idea that I went to see a show on Sunday night down at the FA, and I was going with a friend, but if I hadn't planned to go with someone, I know I could go down there and bump into people I know. And that is lovely, because it makes me feel like I live in a small Welsh mining village, and I can go down to the pub and just bump into people, and there's something that feels very homely about that. And I haven't had many experiences like that. I suppose a little bit at RADA, because I worked at RADA after I trained there as well, so there was an element of I could pop in and see people I know, but not in the same way.
So obviously you had quite an established acting career, and then you've come into improv. What do you think that training and career has brought to your improv that maybe people that come directly to improv don't?
I think the idea of committing to a scene. I think people say you've really got to commit more to the scene, but what does that mean? What does that commitment mean? Because I see people on stage wanting it so much. Do you know what I mean? When I'm coaching or when I'm teaching or directing, I see people wanting to commit, but maybe not quite knowing what that is, because we just throw that word around. We can go really commit, but what does that mean? I think embodying. I think being able to inhabit a character, being able to embody them, and not only make different physical choices for them, different vocal choices, maybe different emotional choices to the ones that you would make, but being able to live for a little while in stage in a different mode, and almost in a different person, really. I think maybe I can, and I don't know how healthy this is, but I think I can think as different people a little bit. I think on stage, when I'm in a different character and I'm very clear of what that character instinctively feels like to me, I think I do think as them a bit. And obviously that's probably just a version of me or whatever, but I think that having that practice of being able to take text off the page and have to make it really matter and mean something to you personally and really connect with it, and then be able to deliver that in an emotionally truthful way and try and embody and inhabit that character. There's something in that process of being able to live as a different human for a little bit, that is the commitment, that is trying to really connect with whatever it is. And particularly in improvisation, in a more like method acting approach, there not being a script to work from sometimes, and having to really inhabit another person psychologically, really inhabit that character. And sometimes I'm using that skill on stage in long form improv to be like a chatty crab who is obsessed with Barbra Streisand. Sometimes that is the character that I'm trying to wholly embody and trying to like really emotionally connect with and be. But I think there's some practice in being able to connect, with those different emotions, the different things, and live in a kind of different setting. Almost like an old Yamaha keyboard, like you put it on like calypso setting, you put it on jazz setting, one of those little buttons. I think there's something in me, maybe I can click a little button, I can live as a different person for a while. But there's also always a thing of the actor monitor, that thing of being like, I can't entirely disappear into this character because there are technical stage things that I need to execute. I need to either do a stage fight, or I need to hit this mark, or I need to be in this position for this light, or there are technical things on the performance side of it that you need to execute sometimes, while also somehow keeping this level of inhabiting this character in a realistic, truthful way buoyant. Like that, those things all need to be running at the same time, like a mixing desk, and sometimes you have to dial certain bits up and certain bits down. So the actor monitor is the actor like monitoring all of those things, but also trying to stay in being this other person in a truthful way. And I think that's also really useful for live comedy, for long form improv, because there are so many things going on, and it's not just reciting the lines. We're trying to keep track of all these different things, all these different moves, all these different players, like maybe lighting cues, what's happening in the space, is there a drunk person over there? What's happening in the room, responding to what the audience is loving or not, all of those different elements going on at once, and being able to somehow monitor all of those different columns of things at once, and be able to genuinely emote, or also learning when to give in to some instincts and when to not. So like you might have a really smart line might pop into your head, but it's maybe not the best time to use it. Not just giving in to every impulse, staying connected, but choosing when to use some things and when not to use some things.
And I've seen you do this so much, where you do just switch into a character, and it's so incredible to see this different person in a scene. Do those characters come from active choices you make at the start, or do they develop through the scene? What's the process of getting into those characters?
It sounds really psychologically unhealthy when we talk about it in these terms, doesn't it? I think it's different depending on the circumstances and the character, maybe. Also in the scene. I don't know, sometimes maybe I make a physical choice and I see what comes from it. Sometimes it's an accent choice. I think, again, it depends. I don't know, are we working premise, are we working organic, are we in narrative? I might have the seed of something and then it grows on stage, or I surprise myself with a line and the audience react to it well, and so I'm like, oh, I'll build on that. Or I go on with a strong idea and I'm like, they hate this, let's put this in the bin. Or sometimes I'm working from someone I've met, do you know what I mean? Like I'm thinking, oh, that really reminds me of that person, so this character will just be that person because that, I don't know, feels like the correct choice maybe. I think it's not always good, it's not always useful, because then sometimes when I go on, I'm just using my own voice, I feel, and my own physicality. I worry I'm being boring for the audience. So it can also be too much sometimes. It can be like a little too piratey. And sometimes the better thing is to just go on and try and emotionally connect and be truthful and work from your own stuff. And also, work from your own stuff. Sometimes, sadly, I'll come off and someone will go, whoa, that was the craziest thing. How did you think of that? And I'm like, that was me. That one was me. Everything else was made up, and that one that you think is terrifying, that was me. I was working from myself there. Uh-oh.
You regularly run an acting course for improvisers at the Free Association. Can you tell us a little bit about what that course is trying to achieve and the sort of things that people learn and the things that you think are really helpful to bring from acting into improv through that course?
I think the more you work on your acting skills, the more it's going to benefit your improv. And the more you work on your improv, the more it's going to benefit your acting skills. I think they can really complement each other. On the acting course, Acting Skills for Improvisers at the FA, which we are about to run soon again, which I'm really excited about. This will be the 6th time it's run, I think. And every time it's been a real privilege, if I'm honest, to run that course, because every time we've had an amazing group of people come for different reasons. We've had people who've maybe just finished the premise level, and we've had people who are in Harold teams. We've had another teacher came and took it. So there's a real different, who's way more experienced improviser than I am. We've had interesting, like, mixed ability levels as well. But every time it's felt like a real privilege to have people come in and trust me and trust each other with a bit of opening up, a bit of stepping outside the comfort zone, a bit of let's try some things that feel really safe and some things that feel really weird, and let's give everything a go and see what comes of it. And it's quite an extraordinary thing, because I think if you're funny, you've probably developed it as a coping mechanism for something. And so it can be really uncomfortable to put that down, especially when you feel exposed, especially when you're trying to do something new. So to try to, I suppose that word of commit, to get people to commit to certain things again and make them feel like safe enough to do that. I do feel like honoured that people are like, yeah, I'm going to go and try this thing, because you can write a blurb for a course, right? You can write a blurb for a course or a workshop, but you don't know every week over 8 weeks what you're going to be doing every step of the way. So what I've tried to do is take things that I found really useful from my acting training then when I came to improv. So things that when I then started really practicing and teaching improv, I thought, oh yeah, actually this thing that I've done in my past has really benefited me here, and flip that around. So now people who are experienced improvisers, I'm showing them these approaches or these methodologies or these techniques that hopefully, because I've found them useful the other way around, they will find useful as improvisers. So we look at different practitioners. We look at Meisner, we look at Stanislavski, we look at Rudolf von Laben and Sisberry, other practitioners. We look at some animal studies, we look at other bodywork, different ways of approaching character, different ways of generating new characters. I think people think they have a certain physical and vocal and even emotional range, but actually there's way more in us there. We just sometimes need prompts to get it out, or to go, okay, we'll try this. And, oh, we've unlocked a little thing there. So it's a kind of exploration of, practitioners and approaches and stuff like that, new skills. But also, it's, if it doesn't sound too corny, an exploration of the people who are taking the course as well, because quite often we get to the end and they're like, oh, I didn't know I had that inside me, which is really nice. Yeah. And each time I almost cry at the last session because I'm so proud of them.
We talked a little bit about commitment. What advice would you give to an improviser to work on their commitment?
That is a tricky question, because I think it's so dependent on the individual performer. And I think a problem with a lot of advice, particularly with improv or even notes afterwards, it's so dependent on that performer in that moment, in that scene, and then that scene's never going to happen again. So like, how would you give notes on that? However, I think we can identify patterns in ourselves, and if you have a good coach that you feel comfortable with working with enough, who has seen enough of your performance to say, hey, this is a pattern. So when I'm working with, as a coach with players longer term, I then feel comfortable to be like, so this seems to be a pattern in your performance. This thing tends to happen because scene by scene, how can you tell? It's really tricky, right? And you can't go, the next time you are playing a clown mortician, you have to do this thing. So it's really tricky. But if you feel comfortable with a coach that you're working with over a long period, they might be able to identify some patterns for you. And once you, or in yourself, if you're good at that, being like, oh, every time I feel, I've made a big character choice, I then feel embarrassed halfway through the scene because I think, is this too much? Am I being too like wacky or whatever? If you can observe that in yourself, those patterns, then you can work on things like that, for example. So you could, I think I once gave some advice to a player where I'd observed this pattern over a long period of time. And I was like, I think what you need to do is, they couldn't stop themselves from laughing. And they wanted to commit so hard. They really wanted to, but they just didn't know how to execute that, because we just say the word, right? And we just tell people to do it, but they couldn't execute it. So I advised them to go and find 2 or 3 of the funniest sketches or scenes from a movie that they just absolutely could not help but roar with laughter at. They just loved. It was absolutely 100% their cup of comedy tea. So I get a couple of those scenes, transcribe them and learn them, and then act them out. So I think, something in that will slowly build up the discipline of not giving in to the laughter. I often feel that there's almost a fork in the road moment when you feel that option of, I could commit or I could get out of Dodge. Like, I could laugh, I could get out, like the fire escape, the comedy fire. I could choose not to commit here and just jump out the fire escape, or I could go in harder. It's often like a fork in the road moment. And if you can identify that, it's almost like when you feel the instinct to laugh in a scene or a corpse in a scene, sometimes you have to choose just to ride through it and go the other way as opposed to give in to the laugh. There's that moment of steeling yourself and being like, no, and riding through it. I think there's, these fork in the road moments, and the more aware we are of them, the more we get used to practicing that skill of identifying them, then we can choose to go the other way and commit harder. I think that, like, sometimes players say to me when I'm working with them, oh, yeah, I just got really in my head. I just want to get out of my head. And I'm like, why would you want to get out of your head? Your head is all you've got. It's doing so many things for you. And if anything, go further in. Commit more to the character. Jump in more. Go deeper. As opposed to try to get this kind of spiritual nirvana zone where, I don't know, I don't think you can go from feeling whatever it is, because what does in your head mean? Okay, you're overthinking, you feel self-aware, you feel vulnerable maybe, you feel maybe a bit of embarrassment or pressure or whatever, that combination of whatever, in quotation marks, like getting in your head means to you personally, that experience of it. It's very unlikely that you're going to go from that state straight into, I feel so free and breezy. I feel loosey-goosey right now. I think it's going to be easier to be like, let's refocus that energy, that acute thinking energy, whatever it is, that headiness. Let's refocus it back into the scene and use it for good. Use your powers for good. I did once read a study, and now I've forgotten the name of the study, so every time I say it, it does sound like I've read it on the back of a candle package, or someone like someone told it to me in a cafe. They were handing me like a chai latte. But I did once hear a proper scientist man say that you can't, if you already feel nervous, you have that kind of adrenaline in your system, you can't just tell yourself you are calm, because the adrenaline has been released into your system. Like, chemicals are going around your system. So you can't go from like a state of high arousal to low arousal, but you can repurpose the energy. So you can go from one state of high arousal to another state of high arousal. So you can take that energy, instead of saying I'm nervous, if you look in the mirror and say to yourself, I'm excited, you can repurpose it and you will perform better. So there was some research that was done with students in a study doing karaoke who were all very nervous public singers. And the ones that tried to calm themselves down did not perform any better. But the ones who tried to tell themselves they were excited, like by out loud saying either I'm calm or I'm excited, the ones that were excited had a better experience and performed better. Because it's already been released, right? So we can't just pretend it's not happening. So if you feel like you're trapped in your head, okay, go to a different bit of your head. Don't try to be like, I'm just going to transcend into this existential mist of improv. I'm just going to, whatever comes to me is just going to flow through me. I don't think that's realistic. But I think if could we commit? Could we go in more? If you're finding it hard to commit, can you double down? Can you go further? Can you really jump into the pool?
Yeah, fascinating. And I'm definitely going to try and use that when I'm feeling nervous. Something I have found really useful to take from acting courses, including yours, is the vocal warm-ups and the stretching and the preparing yourself for stage. How important do you think that is in an improv setting?
I personally think it's really important. But I arguably take things too seriously. Even in comedy. And I've always been like that. Even when I was like in youth theatre, 14, 15, everyone else started going out on Friday nights and drinking. I'd be like, I simply can't. I have youth theatre in the morning. We're doing The Tempest. I have to be ready. Yeah. So I'm aware that other people like want to have fun generally in life and when they're doing improv, and that is not my main agenda. If I'm totally honest, like it is to try to, and it's not cool. It's not cool. I'm not saying it's cool, but to try to perform to the best of my ability for the audience, and I feel I owe that to them and to my teammates as well. So I think it's really important. If improv for you is a thing that is just part of the nice landscape of your life, it's just a fun thing that you do and that you enjoy, or is like a social thing, or if, I don't know, it's something that like going to the gym like boosts your mental health, somehow it's just beneficial for you on just like a happiness level, then maybe you don't need to do a full physical and vocal warm-up or an emotional warm-up, as we also do on the acting course. But if you want to take it seriously, if like you would like to perform regularly and you want to be like the best performer that you can be, I think it is really important to treat it as a serious performance. I'm not the kind of performer who can like have a couple wines before they go on the stage. That's just not my vibe. I don't know how people can do that. I would be singing show tunes, half a glass in. I'd be like, you'd love to hear my Liza Minnelli. I couldn't do it, but also it would just make me so nervous. I think it's so important to prepare. Also, particularly if there's a paying audience, you're taking their money, you're taking their time, and you're not going to try your best. I think it's interesting for me, having had many years in the acting industry, particularly in theatre, and then coming into comedy, the difference sometimes in the attitude to preparation, that like almost in the theatre, like the more you prepare, the more professional you are, the more you warm up, all that stuff, like the cooler it is, like the more respected, and yeah, it's your craft. Versus sometimes this idea in comedy that like, I just turn up and have a couple pints and get on the stage, or yeah, whatever, I'll think about it on the hoof, or there being some kind of bravado or like bragging rights in being able to put in no work and then just maverick it up on stage and be like, I'm a legend. Or like this idea that people which probably was not true, or they weren't good shows, but the people used to like just write their Edinburgh shows in the back of a Greg's bag on the train up to Edinburgh, there's some like weird bragging rights in that, and I just don't get it at all, because I think it's just disrespectful to the audience, it's disrespectful to yourself. It also suggests that comedy isn't an art or a craft, or it's not a valid form, that it's just stupid and shouldn't be taken seriously. We should take comedy so seriously. Take comedy so seriously. So if you want to be really good at it, of course, like maybe 1 in a million people can just sit down at a piano first time and bang out incredible. Most people have to practice and warm up and put work into the craft they want to be good at, or the art they want to be good at. And I maybe have been surprised coming into comedy that like the cool kid thing to do sometimes is seen to be to just jump up there and have no preparation, or that the idea of a warm-up in improv is only there to bond the group as opposed to warm up the individual performer so they can perform at the best of their ability to benefit the show and the team. I really think we have a responsibility to, as much as we can, be performing to the best of our ability. That answer just made me think of this thing. A couple of weeks ago, someone said to me, oh, are you fun or funny? And that you could divide performers, particularly comedians, into, oh, they're either fun or they're funny. And that was not a fun answer.
I think it was a fascinating answer. I find warm-ups really useful, and I think if there was an option, often, unfortunately, usually because improv is hosted in places where there's nowhere to warm up before, or you've got like 20 minutes before a show, you really don't have that opportunity as much. But whenever I have had the opportunity to do proper vocal warm-ups or an extended improv warm-up, I usually feel better on stage.
Yeah, or like taking time to do it at the house. Sometimes like I've done jobs where the only option is to warm up at 5 a.m. in the hotel room, But in order to do my job correctly, then I've got to make some enemies in my hotel corridor by doing vocal sirens at a crazy hour. But that's to get warmed up. But there's also ways you can warm your brain up into an improv space, even if you're like on the tube on the way to a gig. And you know that, we only got 5 minutes before we go on. Okay, are there any mental exercises you can get going with to warm yourself up? Can you go, okay, list 10 countries now, list 8 different types of pastries now? Can you just start generating fresh thoughts? Can you get someone to say to you, even if you're at home with your partner or whatever, can you say, okay, can you ask me to name 5 different new ice cream flavors? Anything that just gets you going. I can do vocal warm-ups on the tube. You can do a vocal siren. No one can hear you because it cuts out perfectly at the same noise as the tube level of the tube noise cuts out perfectly. There are things you can do. You can warm up at home if you know you're going to get to the venue. But it doesn't sound cool, man. It doesn't sound cool. It's that thing of, I didn't even revise for the test and I got an A. You're like, great for you, but I'm not that. Do you know what I mean? And I think I know what I need as well. And the more that you clock in with what you personally need as a performer to feel like you're going to get to a good place by the time you have to go on stage, I think that's important.
You also recently ran a workshop called How to Be a Weirdo.
Yes, How to Be a Weirdo. It's a workshop I'm very passionate about. I'm about to do it again, actually.
What is it about?
How to Be a Weirdo. I first ran at the Free Association last month, but I'm going to do it again in Sweden. What? From London to Sweden. She's international now. Yeah, in August at Gothenburg Improv Festival, which I'm very excited about. How to Be a Weirdo is a workshop that is about character development, but it's also about tuning into your own weirdnesses. So not only making bigger, bolder character choices, really going places, again, with physicality and vocal choices, all that stuff, ways to harvest new characters that come from maybe making a bold physical choice that leads you somewhere, or different approaches like lab and like animal work, things like that are approaches maybe you haven't tried before, you haven't practiced before, but unlock a kind of access to a character that, maybe you didn't know was inside you had the potential to, or getting the seed of something and then following that and seeing what it can grow into. But then the other side of it is acknowledging the little weirdnesses that we all have inside ourselves, that until we say them out loud, like a lot of stuff that's been in this interview so far, we didn't know was weird until we said it into a microphone. Laura. Acknowledging the weirdnesses in ourselves and being like, that's something I can water and grow, and I can use that. I can also work from self. I can really be observant in my own strange eccentricities and use that on stage. So I suppose it's also focusing on heightening our observation powers and being able to grow things.
I often find that I struggle to make big character choices unless I have been explicitly given permission in some way. So in an exercise, if the exercise is, right, you are 2 crazy witches making a potion, I can come on as a crazy witch and give it 100%, because everyone in the room knows he has to do this. He's been told to do this.
That's the assignment. You're fulfilling the assignment. Yeah.
But I struggle so hard to make a huge character choice coming into an organic scene. I think because my ego is everyone thinks that you think you're being funny, or you think you're being I'm so crazy. But rationally, I know that it's the same thing and it results in the same positive outcome. I'm a grey witch. But
the title of your autobiography. I'm a grey witch.
It sounds like maybe there's something in the workshop, or just generally, what would you say to someone struggling with that issue?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that. I totally agree. Sometimes if we're given permission to go big, then we can go really big. But if we're just making that choice for ourselves, I feel, for me, it's not the kind of, I'm not worried about embarrassing myself. I'm worried about looking like I'm showboating or I'm showing off.
Yeah.
But if someone else makes a big offer, it feels really easy then to be like, I'll match it in that. That's okay. Yeah, and I have moments like that on stage where when not only are all of these like actor monitor things running on in my head at once, all of these, I don't know, different lights and columns lighting up and things being monitored, but also a bit I'd love to get rid of in my brain is the commentary on my own performance that's going on at the same time. That, like, sometimes I'll make a move and it will even get a laugh from an audience or whatever, but I think that was too much, that was unfair, that was showboating, that was steamrolling over something else, and what is and isn't allowed. So sometimes I think I hold back on moves that I could have made because I'm worried about that thing. I don't want to steamroll it. I don't want to show off. I don't want to... It would be selfish in some way. It would be selfish in some way to make that big choice. And we've all probably had the experience of being on stage with someone who maybe isn't so much of a team player and they do consistently make choices that feel maybe quite large and selfish. And so we've been on the receiving end of that as well, and we know how horrible that feels. So we don't want to be in a competition, or we don't want to do that to our scene partners, our teammates. But I suppose as long as it's not every time, as long as you are still listening and you are still working with people and you're not just on your own agenda trying to steal focus, upstaging people, maybe the more we practice that, the easier it gets to. Having just said that, I did a show a couple of weeks ago where I did a move that I've been worrying about for 4 weeks. And it was just moving someone off a chair. But someone we know, but I have been worrying about it for 4 weeks consistently because I'm like, where's that? I did get a laugh. They said they were fine afterwards. I did check in 3 times. But yeah, probably comes from a people-pleasing, maybe fawn response to trauma. Who knows? From a couple of us. If you naturally feel like you're a bit of a people pleaser, it probably comes from that. But you know what? It also probably comes from the same place of what gave you the instinct to do comedy anyway. Like, often these things are all running in parallel, and like the thing that got you here is also the thing that's probably making you beat yourself up. All of these things are like interlocking and coexisting at the same time. So maybe we have to force ourselves to make some big moves, or maybe we have to, I don't know, if you have a team that you love playing with, or you're in a 2-prov or something and you really trust each other, maybe you can gift each other with some endowments. Maybe you can go, hey, I'd love us to make some big, bold choices today. So maybe we really listen to endowing each other and taking that on. Maybe if that is a bit of a block or a barrier for ourselves, and you did have 2 or 3 people you worked with a lot and you loved, you could, even in a practice, maybe you could say, hey, let's endow each other with some big gifts that then we are just allowed to play with until we get more comfortable with that feeling. But I feel like we did a scene recently where we were monkeys, our finest work, and I feel like we gave each other permission there, and that was a pretty big swing. And it wasn't on stage, actually, it was in practice, which can feel even more exposing because it's just the people you know in the room. But I feel like we both went with that.
We really did. But again, it's you gave me permission by initiating as a monkey. Do you know what I mean? I don't think I would have initiated that scene as a monkey.
That's 4 years of animal studies for you.
Yeah, I immediately, within a second, knew what you were.
You were a great monkey. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but those big moves, and sometimes I think also, depending on the combination of players and the dynamic in the group, sometimes you can get stuck in a dynamic where you're like, oh, in this combination of players, actually there's a couple of wild cards here or whatever, so I'm going to have to ground everything again. So I think you can find yourself in a position where you're either forced into a certain role if you're aware of trying to make the best show possible, or you have a slightly different performing style in different shows. I think about how I approach performing in different shows differently, different teams differently, depending on the combination, the dynamic and the people, right? Or the style, not just even the style and the structure of the show or the audience or the room, but the personality of the players, and go, okay, in this one, we tend to be like this, so I can fill in this role today. Whereas another, if we're going to Will Hines and Billy Merritt's incredible book, Pirate, Ninja, Robot, even though I get those words in the wrong order every time. Ninja, Robot, Pirate? Those 3 words in an order. Sometimes in some shows, I'm going to have to be like, oh, I'm going to have to really robot this, or I'm going to have to pirate this, or, oh, we're all ninjas. They're great. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that after every answer. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? It's okay if not.
Yeah. No, it didn't. Could you please
No
repeat
worries.
all of that in a way that does make sense? How do you deal with a bad show?
I feel like this is You've seen me after a bad show, Aaron. No. You've definitely seen me. You've seen me when I've come off stage and feel I've not done a good job. Not saying that most of the time I come off and I'm like, nailed it, or oh, I'm so proud. But you've seen me, 2 instances in particular that I can think of. One after a clowning showcase where, how would you describe it? A storm cloud, an Eeyore? I almost self-combusted.
Yeah.
It was bad, right?
Yeah, it was bad. Yeah, it was bad. What?
I have to say, it was only focused on myself. It was not focused on anyone else.
Yeah, it couldn't because it was a clown work. You were literally out there on your own. Yeah, and so I guess that's why, to me, this question is really interesting for you, because I know you are very harsh on yourself. To me, that performance was like still fine, but seeing you afterwards, it was as though you had like completely embarrassed yourself in front of like 10,000 people. But it also was interesting for me because it showed to me how high a standard you hold yourself and how much professionalism you do bring to your improv, which is quite, as we had already talked about, is quite an unusual thing to bring. And actually, I think, although obviously unpleasant for you in that moment, it does also maybe show in when you how good a performer you are because you're holding yourself to such a high standard. Do you think it's useful for you to have those moments of really being that harsh on yourself, or would you rather you were able to be more forgiving to yourself?
I absolutely don't think it's a good thing. And I would hate for anyone we work with, anyone else to feel like that after a show. I'm not saying that we should take things really seriously and professionally, and if you feel like you've done a bad job, you should go home and berate yourself all evening. Not at all. I would love to be more forgiving. I think we should. It's one of those things where I'm like, absolutely believe we should be totally kind to ourselves and understand we did the best in the given circumstances and all of these different elements were going on. Totally wholeheartedly believe that for everyone else, and then it comes to yourself and you're like, but I am a grub. I'm a little shame worm. I describe that feeling that you have seen me have twice as hot molten shame lava, as if I'm full. I'm like, yeah, as if my body is full of shame lava. Like it's hot and it's bubbling up and it's like somehow bigger than the thing it's inhabiting, and it's like horrible. It's not good. It's not good. And again, I stress, I'm not coming off after every other show and thinking like 100%, 10 out of 10 could not have improved, chef's kiss. But when I feel that I've really messed up, like not messed up, but when I feel like I've really not performed, yeah, I suppose it just taps straight into a very like core self-worth place. And again, it's probably the reason why people become funny, or they develop it, or like the reason they get into performing or comedy in the first place. Probably no big shock. It's probably to fill some kind of a hole, or because you got some kind of value up, or you were valued because you had this ability, or whatever, in whatever way, and you weren't feeling valued in some other way, so that became important. But it's, yeah, the stakes are there are no stakes, and yet the stakes are too high. And the feeling of not being able to deliver to an audience. Because sometimes you can go, like I do a lot of character comedy as well. Sometimes you can go on and go, you know what, this isn't this audience's cup of tea, but I still have faith in this character, it's written in this style, or actually I understand the thing I'm aiming at, and they're not loving it, but I think actually I've fulfilled to the best of my ability this thing, versus just feeling somehow that you've not been able to deliver. And I think with improv particularly, because we are in the moment generating it, the stakes are higher and lower. Because it's not like we've had time to edit and revise a script that then we're going like, this is absolutely the best I can do, but there's an amount of forgiveness in it because it's all made up on the spot. But also there's a kind of survival, free-flowing thing that's happening I think what I've learned from this answer is it's probably not a good thing for me to be doing. Maybe it's improv, because I suppose there's an element, there's some bit of us that's maybe in, or maybe me, maybe I'm not, maybe not everyone, but maybe me, that it's, I don't know, tapping into some like flight, fight, freeze, fawn response zone. And if I can't I can't please the audience, I can't win them over, then not good news. It's not good news.
Do you think that's something you can train out?
Definitely. I think it's where you place your value. Like, what is your value? What matters? I suppose it's like when people like, I don't have children, but when people say, oh, I have a kid, now I have a totally different perspective because this other thing suddenly is where all their value and meaning, that's what really matters to them now. So I was talking to another performer recently who said, oh yeah, like I'm not worried about any show now because I've had a baby. So actually, like, that's all that matters. I'm like, wow, yeah, that's really interesting. So if you're being appreciated, you're getting value, you're getting like things from like different areas, right? We should be developing all areas of our life and getting like all of our stuff from all those zones, because we can't put our self-worth in one zone, right? Because then that zone goes and we're screwed. So if you put it all in your work and then your work goes, something bad happens to your work, you're destroyed. If you put it all in your relationship and then the relationship ends, it goes, blah, blah. If you put it all in, I don't know, your looks, we're all going to age. Like it has to be divided around a couple of baskets. It can't all be in one basket. It's a famous egg metaphor I've just gone to there accidentally. Reverse engineered it. Yeah. If you're a happier, more balanced individual as a whole, then this one thing isn't going to matter so much. But then maybe you haven't gotten to comedy in the first place. What is that trade-off? There's some trade-off that's happened earlier down the line that maybe we weren't 100% responsible for, that has like led us to comedy, whatever that is. You give me a very knowing look, which I appreciate, because I feel like I've gone a little bit obscure, but you're on the journey with me. This led us here. So yeah, with a lot of compassion and therapy and community and support, all of that stuff, then yeah, we can get to a much better place with it. And to go on and go, you know what, we tried our best, we tried to please the audience, did it work? But I think what's really complicated sometimes is if you have a bad show or you have a quiet audience or whatever, you can go into a green room and you can be like, oh God, that was a tough one, guys, blah, blah, blah. But what I find really difficult is when everything seems to have gone okay, but for whatever reason, you personally are disappointed in yourself. It can be very difficult to find an outlet for that or to explain that feeling to somebody else. And that's when you're filled with the shame lava.
How do you then deal with, if you have them, periods where you feel less confident? Because I feel like your level of performance is always so consistently high. I feel like you manage somehow to separate your emotions off stage to when you're on stage, and you always bring the same level of confidence and commitment. How do you manage to do that?
Thank you very much. Start off with, I can't accept that compliment because I'm Northern. That's interesting because I don't know if that's not maybe my experience of it. So I suppose it's very like lovely and reassuring to hear that coming from somebody who sees me perform a lot. I suppose I'm just trying too hard on every show, and sometimes I feel like it hits and sometimes it doesn't.
Do you have periods of low confidence in your improv? I feel like I'm continuously on a upwards or a downwards trajectory. Or do you feel like maybe you've hit a point where you like have a baseline confidence in your improv?
I feel like I have periods where I feel more confident and less confident while I'm on the way to shows. Like on the journey into shows, I can be in a very different place. I can either be like, yes, it's okay, or I feel like I'm really practicing. It's not even about the improv so much. It's just how I feel about my life or what happened recently, or whatever. Sometimes if I feel, personally in a lower confidence place and I'm on the way to the show, I'm really dreading it all. I'm really worried about it. But then the on-stage experience is, I'm very focused on doing the job of trying to keep all those things ticking along, all those different elements that we have to manage as improvisers at once. So in a way, like, I'm so focused on the job that very rarely is there room to worry about the things because there's too many other things going on. But also, on the flip side, there's often no room to enjoy it either on stage. I wouldn't say that for me as an aim or experience, really. I am never... I don't think I ever have space in a scene to enjoy it. I think it's like we're doing the job is happening. I think that probably does come from having been in the industry and performed all the time. Even if I'm not getting paid for it, I'm working. We're doing the job now. There's been a couple of times where like I don't corpse that much in scenes, but there's been like one or two shows, like particularly a show with Northern Powerhouse, who are one of my teams that I think of, where I was enjoying it and I was like, this is weird. And because I was enjoying it, I was then, there was like somehow space to enjoy it. And I was also then having a bit of a problem corpsing it. Like in two of the scenes, Patrick Dishman made me laugh so much in one scene that I was like, I laughed and it's so rare. I was like, oh God. So I wasn't fully on task. I wasn't fully in. I'd somehow taken my eye off the ball a little bit and I'd allowed myself to enjoy the show, which made me less of an efficient performer, I think. So, but maybe it's just nicer to enjoy your life and enjoy the shows. Maybe, again, I think it's a thing of me taking it too seriously. Me taking comedy too seriously.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because do you think I want 90% commitment when I'm watching? I do find it hard to watch performers who are wink, wink, nod, and on that scale. I do want 90% commitment, but I also really enjoy seeing the improviser trying really hard and still failing to not laugh or to not show that they're enjoying themselves. And I think part of the enjoyment of watching improv is that often people are enjoying themselves.
Yeah, and it is so charming, isn't it? Like when you do find someone who's just struck by the comedic idea so much that it just like almost captures them unaware. Someone else's work or their own work captures them unaware, and it's a genuine like spark of joy that it just happens, and that is delightful. I don't mind that. I don't mind watching that. I suppose in a way I don't mind experiencing that, even if I'm not doing 100% perfect, but the vibe of being like half out the trap door, like half in, half out, or feeling like you're commenting on this, someone's commenting on the scene, or they need to be seen as being smarter than the scene, or there's something which is just another safety, is just another mechanism to protect ourselves, isn't it? I'm not 100% committed, I can't be 100% embarrassed. But I really believe it's less embarrassing to be 1,000% committed than it is 50% committed. I think 50%, everyone feels awkward. 1,000%. If you're going to watch someone be, I don't know, like a disco crab or whatever, it's just better to see them be 1,000% trying their best to be that thing, as opposed to go halfway, but I'm better than it.
What do you get from teaching that you haven't got from other ways of doing improv?
I think teaching for the free association has been really amazing for me personally, because you do keep checking back in with the syllabus, with like the fundamentals and the basics, and what we're aiming for, what is good practice before you then go on and break all the rules again in a show. I think that's really useful, because when you are training and trying to do things like by the book initially when you start out, and we did a lot of our training together, right? And we did it very quickly because I think we did levels 1 to 4 in a month, like back to back in intensives, right? Yeah, you're getting through it quick and it's great, but like you do the exercises once and you can't possibly retain everything. But then going back and teaching also people who are coming to it from different walks of life, because I feel like when I trained, and it was only really a couple of years ago, in the grand scheme of things, compared to the States, improv in the long form in the UK is way less established. So it was only really a couple of years ago. But I feel like most people who I met training were actors or comedians. A couple had come from other walks of life. And now when I'm teaching, I think it's very different. There's way fewer actors and comedians. Not that they're coming less, but other types of people are coming more from other work backgrounds and experience levels and stuff like that. And that's really exciting for the whole scene, I think, for the whole performance landscape in the country, for everyone's good. But it's good to keep checking in, and also having to explain concepts to different people in different ways to try and get the same idea across to a different individual, and trying to find, often I say to people when I'm teaching, this is the word we use, but if a different word works for you, then replace that word. Like whatever language it takes for you, for the idea to click into your head, you can use that language. Like innocuous heightening. Already some people call that mapping. For me, I think of it as tracing paper. Like that idea just works better for me. Like I would take this one thing and moving, and maybe that is because I also have an art background or whatever, but I'm like, oh yeah, innocuous heightening is improv tracing paper. That makes sense to me. So trying to get concepts over in a way that the individual player can absorb them. Here's the greater idea. Here's what we're aiming for, but how is it going to work for you? How are you going to get there? And so not only checking in with the syllabus, but staying quite disciplined and like focused. And if I am teaching Harold, it's good to constantly check in with, okay, so let's look at an analogous second beat or third beat, and staying focused on the core skills and trying to keep them sharp, but then also then coaching and maybe throwing the book away, depending on where they are in their experience level, maybe devising show formats for people, seeing their strengths and saying, okay, you guys seem to enjoy playing in this way, so actually maybe we could open like this, and you could do this, like the personality of a group growing into the personality of a show and a format. That's quite exciting. And developing individual performers. That's nice because it feels like you're really training people. And I've also coach actors, and I've taught a little bit in drama schools since I graduated. So that's always interesting because you're all working on the same skills, but the focus is also on the development of the individual performer. And so I think I'm very interested in that as well. So when I'm coaching teams or two provs, the more kind of experienced and advanced they get, the more interested I am in developing them as individual performers. And I guess also that's where the acting skills for Improvisers course came from, really, was it felt to me there was a space for the development of that like side of people's skills, particularly if they didn't come back from a theatre background. But I have had people who've been to drama school who come and take the course and still explore and find a load of stuff in it, but there being like a held space where you can try a load of stuff out to develop you, maybe as a performer, maybe as a person, but that there's room for that. That's quite exciting to me, I think.
What are some other things that you enjoy that are not improv?
Well, I do love art. I went to art school for a year before I went to drama school. So I love art. I love animals. My God, I love animals. Yeah, I do think when everyone has that kind of psychological safety escape plan, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to go and I don't know. Sometimes I do think maybe I should be working with animals because I do love animals so much. But I think I love them so much that I couldn't actually be a vet or a carer or anything, because if anything, even, sorry to bring it back to improv, even in an improv scene, if an animal is getting hurt in an improv scene, I'm like, no, sweep. Like, nope. New choice. Like, I can't bear it. So I would not be an effective vet. Or, yeah, did recently think maybe I should train as a dog masseuse. Maybe that would be fun. Because I did some filming the other day, and one of the actors on it was retraining to be a masseuse, and I was like, that's cool. But then I thought, no, because then people will give you money and you have to touch them, and maybe you don't want to. Oh, actually, no. But I thought, dog. I'd never be like, get away from me, dog. So maybe I should be a dog masseuse. What else do I love? I love the work of Patricia Routledge. I love... Do you know what I really love? I love going to the cinema by myself. I love going to the cinema by myself. I like going with other people as well. But I really enjoy... One of the very few times I think I can quiet the mind noise and be alone and not be checking my phone, all of that stuff, where you're like, I have to sit in this dark room for 2 hours and focus on this thing. I'm going to treat myself to all the snacks. I'm really going to be here and try and escape into this world of this thing. Yeah, I like that. Did that twice last week. That feels like some kind of self-care for me.
And on that note, Laura Riseborough, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, friend.
Thanks for listening to the Shiny Things podcast. Don't forget to head over to shinythingscomedy.com for loads more improv-related posts, where you can sign up to our newsletter so you get all of our new content straight to your inbox. Until next time, I've been Aaron Balaction. Happy improving.